is a momentous occasion to recognise and celebrate the invaluable contributions of Black people to British society. Black people have always been at the forefront of social justice movements, fighting against oppression and paving the way for change. However, despite their countless contributions to society, the achievements of Black women in particular have too often been overlooked or forgotten. That is why this year in Black History Month, we are celebrating the exceptional achievements of Black women. The theme of Saluting Our Sisters highlights the crucial role that Black women have played in shaping history, inspiring change, and building communities. My name is Catherine Beattie, and today I have the immense pleasure and honour of talking with Sophia Chandigal, who is someone I am saluting. Sophia is the Chair of Trustees for Plymouth and Devon Race Equality Council. She has a PhD in cross-cultural issues in education and has undertaken ethnographic research with the First Australians and communities from the Global South. She is a Fellow of the School of Advanced Studies at London University. She also works as a BACP accredited counsellor, supporting people through the Devon County Council Wellbeing at Work service. So welcome, Sophia.
Hello, Catherine. Thank you very much for inviting me on. It's a real privilege, so I'm very grateful.
Thank you. So the first question I wanted to ask you, Sophia, was what has sustained you during challenging times and what inspires you?
Right. So when I think of challenging times, I think that on one level they can be quite ordinary, and on another level they can become quite disturbing and distressing. And one of the things I'm very aware of is how the importance of emotions and what part they play. And so keeping my emotions, keeping an eye on them, being able to manage my emotions is part of the way I deal with challenging situations. And I've noticed, say, for instance, with anxiety that I've suffered from before or experienced, is that actually it's quite a driver. So it gives you a feeling that you want a purpose. You have to sort of have a meaning. And so I've learnt that even though sometimes when I feel anxious or something, it feels uncomfortable, I must sort of take a plunge and do something I might feel unsure about, that I haven't planned, and just sort of actually take a leap and get beyond the fear. So if I give you an example of that, I was with a group of students, and the students were expressing prejudice, a sort of degree of racism. And I could feel my anxiety growing. I could feel a sense of panic that actually this wasn't okay and I would have to intervene, I would have to say something, but I felt very unprepared. And I didn't know what was going to happen and what was going to come out of me. But what did happen was that I did actually express anger. I expressed anger at the injustice that was being expressed. And I also exposed my own experience of racism. And although it felt really quite uncomfortable, I could tell that most people in the room hadn't an idea about what I was talking about. They couldn't relate to it. In fact, I felt sort of a sense of relief. I didn't actually feel anxious anymore. And so although it was uncomfortable, it was also quite redeeming to have moved forward and stood up, as it were. So that was one example. But I do realise that we need to be really careful about who we express our feelings and emotions to. And I suppose another way of my coping relates to this feeling that sometimes emotions can just go straight through you and you can feel them going through you. And also you can sort of be aware of your own vulnerability as a human being and accept this experience. And those are the best of times when I will sort of go through that sort of sensation, but I'll also start to notice things that I really love, things that inspire me, like the light on the trees, on leaves, And in fact, I'm quite a creative person. So one of the things that I love doing, or some of the things I love doing, are painting, weaving, writing, these sort of expressions I love. And also, I find that reading other people's work, listening to music, is a real source of inspiration for me. So those things work. But also, I know that I like to use my mind and imagination in terms, I love analogies. So they help me to describe emotion as well. So things like the fine skin, the delicate skin on the edge of a bubble of water, a sort of drop of water that seals it from the air around it. It sort of amazes me. And at the same time, I know about the wild and ferocious and frightening sea, and it's all about water, but they're quite contrasting, and I find that exciting. So I like to have these imaginative times as well. And one of the things, obviously, that inspires me a great deal is literature. So I love the way some writers can parody, can sort of reveal the grotesque, the absurdity of our lives. And you also add a sense of humor and insight. And for that sort of power, I suppose I would attribute to people like Toni Morrison. I think she's really powerful. But also, I love the sort of sense of humanity and compassion and wisdom, as well as humor, that someone like Alif Shafak offers us. So I found that writers give me a sense of companionship, you know, that they're there. I almost have a dialogue with them. I feel that, you know, they're enhancing my thoughts or helping that side of things. And I realized I need to also listen to my body. So, you know, The Body Keeps a Score by Van der Kolk has also helped me at times. And but the main thing is that I'm very fortunate that I've got wonderful close friends and family that have also inspired and sustained me. So that's what has happened to me.
And that just leads perfectly actually into my next question, Sophia, which is, has your family heritage had an influence in your life? And if it has, in what ways?
Right. So when I think of my family heritage, I think of exuberance. I think of a love of the arts. But I also think of a sense of responsibility and a desire to deal with inequality. So both my parents and my grandmother were very social, enjoyed sharing, the idea of sharing our lives. And in particular, my mother was an English teacher and she loved sharing ideas about literature. So that was discussing it. So that was great. But I also had two grandfathers, and the Chanda side of the grandfathers from Bengal, West Bengal in India, he was in fact in Nehru's cabinet. So he was there at that time in India, which was being very liberated and moving away from colonialism, the British being in India. And one of the things that also I know is that my great grandfather, so his father, was offered a knighthood by Britain, but he refused it because anti-colonialist feeling was already evident in my family in the 1800s. So we had that side of the family. And on the other side, my other grandfather was a Ghoul from Cape Town. And the Ghouls are very well known for their fight against apartheid. They were a very dynamic family. And my father, in fact, wrote a book called Cape Town Coolie, which was about the beginnings of the era of apartheid. And it's published by African Writers Publications, in fact. So there's all this political side of the family, which has influenced me. But then also I had this late uncle, Rafiq Abdullah, who wrote poetry and translated Rumi's poems, which was was very moving. And he was also given an MBE for his work with Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. So there was a real emphasis in the family on different perspectives as well that affected me. And I'm very fortunate because my wonderful two children have both sort of followed suit, as well as my nephew. But as far as I'm concerned, for me, I've sort of got involved in ethnographic research, and it's given me the opportunity to work with the Indigenous Australians and the first Australians. And I do feel passionately about their land rights, actually. And I also, my publications have been about, you know, the less heard voices and the voices of the global majority. And so that sort of links in. But this inheritance, this sort of heritage that I had, I didn't actually know these grandfathers. I knew about them. And I actually didn't feel at all well equipped to be part of the family, because I failed the 11 plus and I went to a secondary modern school, and I didn't have very much self-esteem. So I felt a little bit daunted by this family. But I was fortunate because I had this Austrian-Italian grandmother who was my emotional advocate, as Alice Miller would say. And that helped me to feel some self-esteem in my childhood, which was really helpful. So although my heritage is sort of like a wonderful and generous in some ways, or, you know, active, it also has been an opportunity to engage with a lot of other people in the world that's really given me a feeling of connection with lots of people. So I think the combination of heritage and moving around has really helped.
Thank you. I think that's a fascinating history, really amazing. So the third question I was going to ask you, Sophia, is what advice would you give to people who are or have experienced racism or discrimination?
Right. So I was brought up in North Norfolk, and I did experience racism and prejudice, and I did feel like an outsider, and I felt a sense of shame about who I was, and inferior is how I felt. But I didn't possibly realize all this, because it's rather painful and upsetting, for many years. And in some ways, I could say I was in denial. So I would recommend that young people, children, adults who experience racism and discrimination actually go out and find organisations like Plymouth and Devon Race Equality Council, or Beyond Face, or other emancipatory organisations, and actually seek them out and gain that a bit more sense of positive self-esteem and get their support. And as a counsellor, I would say one of the really important things is that you've got a right to feel angry, to feel anxiety, to feel fearful, distressed, all sorts of powerful emotions. But those emotions will need to be expressed somehow, hopefully. So you could do it in terms of writing or creativity. But in fact, it's also important to give yourself time to process these emotions, and if possible, have the dialogue with other people, find out what other people's lives are like if you get the chance. You know, in some ways, be curious. Curiosity has really helped me. I'm very curious to know what other people have experienced. And I would actually also recommend, as you might anticipate, again, looking for artists and performers and writers, because they can be really inspirational, give you a sense of companionship. And as I was searching online for this in advance of this interview, I found a rather fantastic choreographer called Jabana Jaya Singh, and she designed this dance called the Outlander. And it's a mixture, it's a sort of synthesis of Indian classical dance and also contemporary dance. And as I watched it, I felt a sense of pride in being partly Indian, but I also felt moved by the sense of space that it evoked and how it expressed the difficulty in living, but also expressed the transcendence out of that difficulty through this incredible movement. So I found that very uplifting. And then, of course, they're the famous and well-known role models to turn to that you will know about and I'd recommend. So Arundhati Roy from India, Mama Aziku III from Ghana in Africa, Amanda Gorman with her amazing poetry at Biden's inauguration. So there are a lot of powerful women out there and people who can dignify your community and you. And also, there's the opportunity through music, because music's rhythm and lyrics sometimes they're a great sense of empowerment. You know, you can really relate to that and engage with it. So I think music has a wonderful capacity. And because I love words, I also really love action. I think action is as important as words. And therefore, I would encourage, if you feel like it, join other active movements. Black Lives Matter is amazing. So that's another opportunity. And just to remember that actually you are important, that you have to be heard, that it's really important that you're heard, that there will be people out there who will believe you, and to sort of recognize that we live in a social world and people really benefit from sharing their experiences and their lives. So that's how I see it. And as I have sort of mentioned before, wandering on the moors, looking out over the sea, just the enormous expanse of a land and sea, I find incredibly moving and gives me a sense of peace, in fact. So that works for me. In Plymouth, we call it the ocean as well, to make it that much more fantastic. But also, I just like the subtleties of listening to the blackbird singing, or the wind in the grass or in the leaves, among the leaves. These things matter. And I feel passionately about this because I know we belong to a really profound and immense ecosystem that's also very fragile, and that we need to share and attend to together and look after. So that's where my heart is as well.
Thank you, Sophia. That's really beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kath. It's been a pleasure. Really wonderful opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.